What is up, everybody? This is your guy Cly, and I actually have no idea how I'm going to classify this video, because what I'm going to be doing today is customizing this Redragon K628 Pollux with the help of Mozano. And specifically, I'm going to be changing out the keycaps, the key switches, and the cable that I use with this keyboard. Mainly due to the fact that these are going to be some of the first mods that a lot of people are going to be doing. Yes, technically there are much cheaper mods like the tape mod, where you put a bit of masking tape on the back of the PCB of your keyboard in order to change the sound. But in order to do that mod, you're going to need to disassemble your keyboard, and a lot of people aren't comfortable doing that as their first modification, which is why it's sometimes considered advanced. Of course, swapping out switches on a keyboard that's not hot swap compatible would also require disassembly and technically is even more advanced, but fortunately that's not the case here. Instead, not only is this keyboard hot swap, but it's one of the first models with universal switch compatibility to roll out of Redragon's manufacturing plant. And as such, I'm definitely going to use some 5-pin switches. But before I go any further, I do want to go ahead and say that all materials in this video, from the keyboard to the caps, switches, and cable, were provided free of charge, though not necessarily for this video. The keyboard is from Redragon, the switches, caps, and cable are all from Mozano. And because of that, even though I wasn't paid to make this video, I will still be marking it as a paid promotion because it could be considered payment in kind. All of that preamble out of the way, let's get these keycaps off and get to modding. Okay, now that I've got all of the caps out of the way, it is time to pull these switches. And for that, you have multiple options. You could go with one of the U-shaped switch pullers that is included in not only this keyboard, but pretty much every low-cost mechanical keyboard on the market. Alternatively, you could go for one of the more popular options, which is an IC puller. These are tweezers that are meant to be used to pull integrated circuit chips out of their sockets. Or you could get one of these purpose-made switch pullers, which is very similar to an IC puller, but as you can see, it is designed to actually fit around a switch, and the teeth are nowhere near as long as those on an IC puller. Alright, I have all of the switches out of the board, and now it's time to install the switches. But before that, I want to do just a quick overview of hot swap, so let's zoom in really quick. Now, like I said earlier, this is one of the first keyboards from Redragon to feature true universal hot swap. And they did that by not only including these sockets, but also these additional holes to the side of the central one. Previously, they were using a setup like this, which has a couple of metal sleeves where you're going to have the metal contacts of the switch, as well as just a single hole in the center. And because switches are confusing, this is referred to as 3-pin and this is referred to as 5-pin, even though there's only 2 metal contacts on either type of switch. And when you're talking about electronics, the metal contact is the pin. But when you're talking about switches, every single protrusion underneath the switch is a pin. So in the case of a 3-pin switch, you've got the 2 metal contacts and the central post. And on a 5-pin switch, you have the 2 metal contacts, the central post, as well as 2 additional nubs, which are used for not only keying the switch into the socket and holding it center, but also making sure you don't accidentally try to install it into something like this, because these sleeves will not handle metal contacts this thick. And now that I have that crash course out of the way, it is time to install these nylon-housed 5-pin pre-lubricated linear switches, like so. And I'm done. This actually took me a bit longer than pulling all of the switches due to having to get everything oriented properly. Also, these are some of the quietest switches I've ever used. Second only to some switches that I have that are specifically designed to be so quiet they could give a membrane keyboard a run for its money. Now it's time for the caps, and for that I'm going to be using these keycaps from Mozano, which are not only in black and pink, but also a few additional highlight keys. And just like the switches I'm using in this build, these keycaps were inspired by the show Killing Eve. Specifically, these keycaps were inspired by the character Villanelle. And Mozano was kind enough to send me not only the base set, but also the numpad set, which is kind of why I'm using the 75% keyboard in this build. The only thing I'm really missing are the novelty keys, because Mozano kinda sent me these keycaps before those were available, and I took my sweet time putting these to use. Sorry about that. Now, before I actually install these, I do want to take a moment to talk about what these keycaps are and how they're made. So let's zoom in really quickly. Now, these keys are actually kind of unique in my experience, because despite the fact that they are two-tone opaque, these keycaps are actually made from double shot ABS. And what I mean by double shot is that the dark gray and the pink are both two different pieces of plastic, not one piece of plastic that's been dyed to have that design on it. And if you flip this over, you can see that. And it's not every day that you see opaque plastic being used this way. Typically, what you're going to see is an opaque piece of plastic with a translucent insert that allows the backlight to shine through the cap. You're not going to be getting any shine through on these, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, especially when you take into account the fact that most keys like these are actually made from white PBT caps that are then dye sublimated to make it look like this. So instead of having a dark gray piece of plastic and then orange plastic, if I flip this over, you can see that it is all white on the inside with a little bit of dye around the edge from where it was sublimated. Though dye sublimation is pretty permanent, as you can see, it does leach down into the keycap. That being said, it doesn't leach very far, so while these aren't going to wear off anytime soon, if you happen to scratch it deep enough, you're going to lose your design and you're just going to have a bright white streak on your keycap. Not so much here due to the fact that it is double shot. Also, one of the downsides to ABS keycaps is they're typically thin-walled. So if I take this white one right here, bring in my caliper and just give it a pinch, you can see that it is 0.81 millimeters. But if I bring in the Villa keycap, it's going to be 1.45, so nearly double the thickness of the other ABS cap. And that's because the double shot portion goes all the way to the bottom, whereas on these it really doesn't come even to the halfway mark. It's going to sound very hollow. Not so much here. It's going to be similar in thickness to the PBT keycap, which comes in at around 1.53 millimeters. Very close. And here we have all of the keys swapped in. And I gotta say, this keycap set does kind of justify its price tag due to the fact that it comes with all of the different weird size keys you'll need. Not only does it have an off-size 0 for the numpad, but it has different sizes for the Control, Alt, and Function to the right of the spacebar, as well as multiple sizes of Shift key, and even an alternate Enter key for those in other regions. It even comes with Super and Code keys for those of you not using Windows. Now, the last piece of this upgrade puzzle is going to be the USB cable, because this is a wired-only keyboard. And for the cable I'm going to be using, it's going to be a coiled aviator cable, once again provided by Mozano and made to match this keycap set. And this is also how you can tell I took my sweet time getting this video made, because while my cable comes with this very nice chunky connector that's been powder coated, this connector seems to have been retired by Mozano as of the recording of this video. Let me go ahead and insert a shot of the one that they're currently using. And as you can see, it is nice and sleek, and the silver on that connector does look good with this color scheme. I am kind of sad to see the powder coating go, but at the same time, I can understand why they retired it, due to the fact that while the powder coating does look good, it's still an external coating and those chip. They probably wanted to go with something a bit more permanent like their keycaps, which is why they went with the double shot ABS as opposed to the sublimated PBT. Now let me go ahead and put the cable together, just slide that together, tighten this ring here, and it's a USB 2.0 cable with a Type-C connector. Got to admit, these are very nice looking connectors. Now, let's just take a moment to get up close and personal with this cable, because while the connector has changed, everything else has remained the same. What we have here is a tightly coiled cable, which is very popular in the mechanical keyboard community. What looks to be a paracord inner and a Tech Flex outer. So you're going to have a very nice cable that is a bit stiff, but also very durable. Now that I have that out of the way, let's get to the sound test before and after. Okay, so while staging this shot, I realized that I really should have used a different base keyboard for this project, simply due to the fact that these cables are more meant for connectors that are behind the keyboard as opposed to the side. But with that being said, none of the keyboards I have with a back-mounted connector would have been able to show off all of the additional keys that were available in this kit. But that's beside the point. What I really want to say is that you can definitely hear the difference between the two types of switches and keycaps, or at least I can. These have a much deeper sound, and as such, they sound amazing. I could definitely get used to using this as my daily keyboard for the sound alone. And that's really all I was here to do. Upgrade this keyboard and show you how to do it, because like I said, the stuff that I did here is going to be a lot of people's first foray into keyboard modding. Later on, you might open up your own keyboard and either convert it to hot swap, add some sound dampening foam or tape to the back of your PCB, put a silicone gasket behind your base plate, all kinds of other things. We are just scratching the surface of keyboard modding here. Also, if you like the look of these keycaps or would like to see some of the other ones available from Mozano, because even if you're just going with the Killing Eve inspired caps, there is an Eve set to go along with this Villa set, and there's even more themed sets to choose from. I'm going to go ahead and leave the link to this set as well as the switches down in the description below, and if you use code ClyFaker at checkout, you'll save 20%. And no, this is not an affiliate code. This is just something Mozano wanted to do for my viewers. I don't get anything if you use that promo code. Now, because this video has gone on a bit longer than I originally anticipated, I think I'm going to go ahead and say, until next time, this is your guy, Cly, signing off.